the deal. Perry and Paul are in some, I don't know if we got different links or something, because Tim sent me the link he got, and now it's fine, but they're somewhere else. So if we gotta wait a second.
They might be on the original one I sent out.
Oh, so it's the second one?
You got to get on the second one link I sent out.
Can you let Perry know, and I'll call
Sure.
Paul?
Yep.
Oh, you have to get on the second link that you sent out, on the first one. So it's a different link. So go back to your email, go to the second email, get on that one. I don't know. I don't know that you have to look at the time on the email and figure out which one is the second one. Yep.
The second one was sent yesterday at 12:59 p.m.
Q.
The email was sent at 12:59 p.m. yesterday. I'm probably going to get started because everybody's been waiting for a while here. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Where's Kathy?
I'm right here.
Did you get Perry?
I text him to tell him.
Yeah, Paul's trying to figure it out. I think I'm going to get started. Is that okay with you guys?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Paul and I are doing vertical jumps. And just so you know, he has far more experience at the higher levels than me. But vertical jumps, pole vault, and high jump. And the way we had split it up is I was going to cover the pole vault, he was going to cover the high jump. So right now, I'm going to start out. This is just, some of it applies to both, but these were some of the things we were going to try. Now, can everybody see this PowerPoint?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so we were going to cover the venue setup. We thought was important, recording on the event recording sheets, a little bit about conducting the event, but I think that might be the part that you know the most about. And we have some helpful resources and hopefully questions. Okay, so this is a conversion chart for, this one is for the pole vault, but it is like a must-have. There's a few things that it's a must-have. This is a must-have from the best practices. It's a conversion to English. So when you're setting up, you can make that conversion, and oftentimes you need to announce both the metric and the English measurement. So I was going to let Paul explain this, but this is also from best practices, and it's the high jump venue setup. And this would be at, you know, a high level competition because there are a lot of officials here. There's 8 in this particular one. And again, from best practices, and it shows you the position for each of the people that are working this event, the flight coordinator, pit judge, and so on. You only will use this kind of thing at a real high level meet probably. And you can have anywhere from 8 down to 1 running the high jump. Pole vault venue setup, this is the same sort of thing. You can use up to 10 officials, and it gives you all the different jobs for all of those 10. The chief judge, pit boss. The pit boss is the one that makes sure the standards are set, the bars put up correctly, all that sort of thing. 2 bar lifters, that's a tough job when you're getting up there 17, 18 feet. There's a pit judge, which I'll talk about in a minute, and a standard setter. First recorder, electronic recorder, a timer with a flag, and a flight coordinator, and a second recorder. So the timer with a yellow flag, one of the things that when there's 15 seconds left in the vaulter's time, let's say they're up on the runway, they have 1 minute, and we're down to 15 seconds. The official with the yellow flag should raise the yellow flag. And the important thing to keep in mind about that is you don't lower it as the vaulter is running. So if the vaulter starts running, make sure you just hold that flag up until they're past you, because it can be a distraction.
Luann?
Yep.
With that, if you have an electronic timer, you don't have to use the flags, correct?
In the rule book for USATF, it does say to use them. So, and every time that I've worked anything like that, so yeah, I know that's the way we do an NCAA. I think that's just the difference.
Okay, so in NCAA, if you have the electronics, you can ditch the flags.
We have done that before. You know, I honestly don't know from the rule book. I don't know if anybody else does.
Well, I have it here.
I can send it to you.
If visible indicators are not used,
okay,
it's about using the flags. So I guess by assumption, it's saying that if visible indicators are used, you aren't using them.
Right, right.
Okay. You're always supposed to use the yellow flag.
You always are, Kathy?
Yes, they use the yellow flag for timing.
But you don't have to use it if you have a visible counter, right?
Yes, you do. Yeah.
You know where that comes in, Tom, I think, is like when you need to have like 5 hands to do all the things you need to do.
Yeah, understood. Yeah.
You know, and most of the people that we have, when we run the NCAA meets and you tell them they're fine with that, but I get it, you probably should, but I also get it that sometimes you just don't have enough hands.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You don't have a lot of officials.
Appreciate the answer. Thank you.
So pole vault instructions to athletes. This is a USATF one. I actually created my own. There's a lot of information on that. When you're talking to 20, 30, 40 vaulters at the beginning of a meet and they're all excited and ready to go, they're not going to listen to you go through all that stuff. So all of that's important, and it's important to get across at one time or another. But it's also important that you that they pay attention to what you do say, and you don't keep them there for 15 minutes reading all that stuff word for word. So like I said, I created my own instructions to athletes kind of thing. And depending on the time of the season, the beginning of the season, you have to give them a few more instructions, you know, by the end of the season. And especially if they're somebody you've worked with, you don't need to be quite as detailed. You can see the time limits on there. Again, they're 1, 2, 5, and 3 for consecutive. So 1 minute to initiate the vault at the beginning when you have the full field. This is USATF again. 2 minutes when there's only 2 or 3 left. 5 minutes when there's 1 vaulter left. And if they're making consecutive attempts, 3 minutes. So I don't think, gloves and tape are allowed in USATF too, just so you know. That's, I think that was a change a few years ago. The warm-ups in USATF, it says there will be no warm-up on the runway once the competition begins. That depends on the level. At the open level, it really doesn't address it in the rule book, so I'm not sure how they decide that. I do remember Rick and Jen complaining that she never got any warm-ups in the USATF open meets. Kathy, do you have any information on that?
Yeah, that's correct. The open ones, they don't get warm-ups once competition starts.
In the youth meets, however, they can have a warm-up every 3 heights. So let's say you're going to pass 6 heights. You can have a warm-up after the first 3, and then you can take another warm-up after the next 3 heights. So But if you're going to come in after 5 heights and you take a warm up after 3 heights, you can't take another one after 5. So that's a different rule for the USATF and the U.
Masters also is different.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. What is the Masters? I don't remember.
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
It has. It's been a while. Is Paul on yet?
I just sent him the link, so he should be getting on shortly.
Okay. This paper right here, I do a lot of prep before I go to a meet. So if I can get on some timing site or wherever I can get it, I try to get the progressions and I write them out ahead of time because I write down what the bar height is supposed to be in English and metric. And then the standard, this is for when I get there, then I have to write down where the standard has to be, and they're not necessarily the same. The left one might be different than the right one. So I put the left one on the left side there and then the right one and which peg it goes on for a particular height. I find that really critical because it is so easy in a competition to mess up what the height is. Just for instance, if you have a venue that the top peg is like 4 meters and this opening height, let's say is 305. Oh, no. So you would have to know that you would set the standards at 395, 4 pegs from the top. So all of that math calculation, and I don't know that we need to really go through all of it, but all that math calculation can really be messed up pretty easily if you don't write it all down ahead of time.
Just hold on, I'm trying to make this.
The key is measuring the height at every bar change.
Yes. Yep. It definitely is, but
it saves a lot of aggravation.
There's 30 centimeters usually between the pegs. That varies a little bit, but that's your typical distance between the pegs. This is the same, it's called a Pit Boss reference card. This is a USATF version of that. I just find mine simpler. Okay, so I did a couple of score sheets here. They did 2 the same. So this is one I wrote out real quick and I sent out in an email. Chris Cummings did an excellent job of narrating a slide presentation of how to do this, but this is just written out real quick. So I wrote out this one. That one's just done in black and white. Okay, I'm gonna address the second one. I have a little highlighter. I like to use a lot of highlighter and it didn't show up as well as I would like here, but oftentimes in the pole vault, you have a lot of competitors. You might have 25, 30. I've had up to 48, I think was the most. If you're just dealing in the black and white all the time and you've got multiple pages, it's so easy to miss people. So what I do is I use a highlighter to indicate where they're going to come in, what they've passed, and once they're out. And that to me is a lot clearer picture. Some critical things on the score sheet would be your start time. If you're in an NCAA meet, for instance, and you need to write down your start time, I usually try to announce it. And then an hour later, those vaulters that come in after an hour are allowed 2-minute warm-ups. So that's a critical time that needs to be on your score sheet. You can see the rest of the top is filled in. Across the top is the metric and the English measurement for everything. And we usually try to announce it both ways. On the left, you'll see that Katie Smith from Notre Dame, she's opening at 3:05. Kathy McLyman is opening at 3:05 and so on. That should be Christine Cummings. Is opening at 3:65 and so on. So your X is a failed attempt and a 0 is a make. And that's what that is.
So Luann?
Yep.
Oh, is this an NCAA event or USA?
Why, what do you mean? Why are you asking?
Well, in a USA, you wouldn't have the warm up after an hour.
Oh, yeah, we addressed that already.
Oh, okay. All right.
You're right. There's no warm up. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
So at the best mark on the right-hand side, the Katie Smith didn't qualify DNQ. Kathy McLyman, she made 380. The 2 and the 3, I did it both ways. On best mark, 2 means 2 misses at the last height that she made. So if you look back on Kathy's at 380, she has 2 misses, and then the final attempt was a make. The 3 in the top right-hand corner is for 3 misses overall. Okay, so if you look back, she had the 2 misses at the last height and 1 at 335. And I always indicate those in after with their best mark. On this particular score sheet, there's a place for that column to the right with a diagonal. But on some score sheets, there isn't. So I marked all that down. Where that comes into play, if you look at the 3rd and the 4th vaulter that both vaulted 440, is it's easy to see the one that came in 2nd place has fewer misses. They both had 0 misses on their final attempt, and then one had 2 misses overall and the other had 3, and that determines place. Anything else on that?
Luann?
Yep.
I did find masters, if they have not taken an initial trial in at least 1 hour from the first trial of the competition, they can have a warm up.
Okay.
Yes, masters is allowed.
With 1 attempt within 1 minute.
And Paul and I worked a master's meet in, it was Michigan, right? And yeah, Michigan, yes. Grand Valley, where we did multiple age groups vaulting at the same time. And in that situation in a master's meet, which I don't think is entirely uncommon, once somebody wins their age group, then you have to figure out how to work in the attempt that they want to make on their next attempt. So sometimes they'll stay with the progression, which I found a lot of them did, but sometimes if they want to determine their own height, you have to work it in so you don't lower the bar. So that's a little bit challenging. This is a picture of some of my stuff. So the left, there's a cone, a squish down. I got a Harbor Freight. The signing and the names on it are all the kids that won different meets. Then there's the tape down the lower left, you know, at least 100-foot tape. Your 3 flags, your red and your white and your yellow. The clipboard in the middle is why I really took this, because that's the, that's for multiple sheets. And I could not do a large meet without that big clipboard, because I just can't flip pages when you have people coming in all over the place. Some events you have people coming in consecutive order, right? But not in the pole vault. So I use that. It's just a piece of masonite-like material, and you can see the clips that I use. Paul, you can explain yours, because I put a picture of yours on there too.
Yes, this is a piece of foam board, actually. Patty Mitchell down in Ohio showed me this. I have a wooden one that I frequently use, but on this one, with creative folding, you can see that up near the top, there's a lot of space for all the information. But if you folded that all the way over the top, you could start with the progressions and then work down. As you can see here, you could actually put a 3rd sheet on this. And so you're getting 38 kids on there, 38 jumpers on there. And if you need another one, then grab another one, but that works well. And the thing that I find really helpful is the banker's clip up there in the upper left, that long thing, because there you can find your place easily. That's very handy if you have to do 5 alive. But if you've got a lot going on and you're by yourself, it helps you hold your place quite nicely. The problem is you have to order these special now from places like Office Max and whatnot. They used to be there all the time. And Wally Cook believe it or not, way back when, told me about those, and they work really well.
Okay, what else do I have here? Oh, random, these are my random tips. I wrote arrive at least too early for a setup and warm up at the pole vault. That's usually not enough time unless you know your venue and you know the people are going to have it basically set up correctly. A warm up in a pole vault is usually 1 hour minimally. So, and it depends on the number of vaulters. So your warm up could be almost 2 hours sometimes. So it all depends on the size of your field and so on. Like I said, I try to get the height progressions the day before so I can develop a sheet with all the heights in both English and metric. When nearing the end of the warm-up period, I try to stand at the go down the line and get the opening heights then. If you try to get them too early, they end up changing them a lot because they get warmed up and it changes. So I try to do that then, especially I'm thinking more of a larger field. I can always confirm the opening heights when we start the meet. And you need to be aware of records. So usually I depend on a lot to the communication with the athletes. If they know there's a record that I need to make sure we measure, and then, you know, we need to measure every attempt, then I make sure that they let me know if they're aware of something I am not. Paul, do you have anything else with that?
With records, no, usually they're on the sheet. When you go to a big meet, of course, they're on the sheet. So you
Right.
know what you're dealing with there. And those, of course, have all been predetermined, you know, the progressions by the games committee. So that's not a real worry. I know that what you're talking about is when you go to an individual meet, let's say an NCAA
Right.
indoor, yeah, there you want to be concerned. Or if there's a qualifying mark, okay, the kid can go to a higher level meet within the NCAA by making this qualification. So you want to set your board up so that he can actually get that in the regular progressions.
Yeah, that's an important point because that's something the coaches have always indicated to me that they want that in the progression. So sometimes at the NCAA meets even we've like changed that with everybody's permission so that it is in the progression.
Right.
That's up to the meet director to make sure that happens.
Right.
They should make sure when they set the progressions that the qualifying mark is not in the middle of a height change. It should be at the bottom of a height change.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a meet director's job.
Yeah. A lot of what I'm talking about too is some of these tips are like, when you're at a big meet, it's really pretty easy because if you have 10 people, your job is, you have one job.
Yeah.
So, but most of us don't do that a whole lot. So other equipment that I usually bring in, I actually found that most of the officials at the bigger meets bring stuff, WD-40, not so much at a big meet that's there have a good pip, but that's something you need, screwdriver, wrench. Even at some of the bigger meets though, we've had the pegs sometimes get bent, they're bent down. You have to use a wrench and turn them so that they're at least they're level. Clamps, duct tape, shims, a laser or a measuring stick, a level, a plumb bob. I have a metal yardstick with an English metric measurements on it that I use in case I need to put something on the standards. So those are some of the things that I cart along with me. Thinking of anything else, Paul? I see you're thinking.
No. Okay. If we're going to the big meets, did you explain the Pit Boss reference sheets?
We went through them, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because everybody on the crew should be aware of the heights. And then I was at at the last NCAA indoor that I did, the D3s. Mike Powers was the pit boss from Chicago. And he says, Paul, do we have to measure every height? And this was for the combined events. I said, Mike, and this was right after that incident at the Division Ones where they measured the bar wrong. So everybody was conscious about that. And he says, should we be measuring every height? And he
Yes.
just asked me, not the chief. I said, Mike, if you're going to do that, you should at least come around and read the standards. Now, we had the Cadillac standards, we had the Gill automatic. And I said, at least come around and read that. That way, at least you know that they've been set correctly, and you're not taking my word for it. So
I thought I had the Gill standards next. I wasn't trying to hurry along. I just, so I put that picture in there. This is just a card with the time limits on. Like I said, pole vault 1, 2, 5, and 3 for consecutive. High jump 1 or 1.5, 3, and 2 for consecutive.
Yeah, and this is what makes the verticals a different animal altogether from the other events, because this is all going to start when we get less than four jumpers left in the competition. Then you start moving in, and then you also run into the situation for USA with 2 or 3 vaulters left. The time is 2 minutes, but if they have to take a consecutive, it's 3 minutes, and they get the longer time.
Mm-hmm.
And
something, and converse to that, I was at a competition with Luann Fire, and we had a kid come in after everybody had jumped out, and because he came in after everybody was done, he didn't get, you know, the additional time. He had, his first jump was only 1 minute, even though, because
so you make
he was
a bar
entering the competition.
Yes, now that's a good point. Everybody's first jump, no matter when they come in the pole vault, is 1 minute. Now, they changed it for the high jump to the 30 seconds, but then they reversed it last year. But the NCAA still has that 30-second rule. And I was actually at down in Ohio, and I was helping out on the high jump after we had finished the pole vault. And they were misinterpreting that. And I wasn't about to say, wait a minute, guys, but they changed their bar, and they were giving the guy 30 seconds because it was his first attempt at that. And I said, no, that's his first attempt in the competition. And then after that, he's on the time schedule like everybody else. So people really need to look at that. And I think when they have training clinics, that's got to be a point of emphasis too, that everybody interprets that correctly. This is the Gill. This is the Gill bar, and you can see here the bungee is extending over on the right side. The lever that you see with the red above it, that is the locking lever. That is what raises and lowers your height. And you can see that runs very smoothly up the side there on the pulley system. The little knob that you have on the next face, on the gray face over there, is what you use to set your standards. So the standards run back and forth along this red platform that you see here. And unfortunately, this is the only view of it that I have, but it really makes for easy operation for standards and for setting your height. It's not always like that. Of course, you've seen everybody pushing the standards back and forth to get them to 0 for height measurements. So when you're assigned to one of these, and again, like at the NCAA in Boston, Roseanne came up to me and she says, "You mean all you have to do is turn this lever?" And I know she was teasing, but at the same time, yeah, this does make your work easier. Yeah, it makes your work easier. And it also makes setting the bungee pretty easy too.
This is Paul's picture too. This was an indoor meet at Albuquerque, so.
Yeah, this was the indoor nationals in 2020. And when we were getting up to the higher heights, you can see that our crew was too short, and we were standing on pads and everything else to try to get the bar up there. And guys were holding it in place when we were trying to raise the bar. And somebody in the stands took a picture of the crew at work here. And to make things even more complicated, on the left standard up at the top, you see the camera for that particular shot that they want. And that makes the standard on that side twice as heavy with the camera up there and all the wires that are attached. And you can see Bob down there in the middle is about to shoot it with the laser once we get the whole thing together. But again, we have to do this quickly, and everybody just did it spontaneously. Everybody was out there working together, get that bar up, because we had a crowd. We were at kind of like 18-6, and we had 8 guys left. So it was a really heavy-duty competition in that meet.
Okay, and then just to finish out, this was the Masters crew in Grand Valley. And these are just, this was Paul's picture of Jen's world record.
Yeah, everybody was pretty excited at that one. You know, actually there were 3 girls from Western New York. Mary Saxer was in there. Janice Kepler was also in that competition. And then Jen was in there, and you know, Jen gave me the number. I was the flight coordinator, and we went down and we realized, okay, this is an American record. So boom, she pops right over, and then she comes storming down the runway, and she gives me the number 502. And then we look, and all of a sudden we realized, hey, we're going for a world record here. And the whole crew was excited, and she popped it. And it was really a great competition. So of course, you're not supposed to take pictures of the athletes. But you see Roger there, and Roger just happened to have a camera. So we all got this picture, which was really nice.
Okay, so that's the end of that one. So give me 1 second here. So I'm going to pull up, what I'm going to talk about is how to set up the pole vault. And I'm going to borrow this from the USATF archives here. So how to set up the pole vault. Paul and I talked about what to cover, you know, pretty much running the competition. Everybody knows up on deck, on hold, all that stuff. So what we decided to do was to go over as sort of quickly how to set it up. Of course, safety is your #1 issue, venue inspection. The equipment required is going to be in this, the setup procedure, zeroing and all that sort of stuff. So, so your #1 job is safety. Okay, when officiating a pole vault competition, you have to be concerned about the safety of the competitors. I think we're all aware of that. So inspect around the pit. One thing that I find people always fall short on, if you look around the pit, it says cover hard surfaces with 2 inches of dense foam. And look at, I don't see any 2 inches of dense foam around the outside of the pit. And I have seen vaulters land over, can you see the cursor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Land over in this area, and it would have been nice if there was some padding. So we also had one at RIT. I'll show you in a minute what happened, but he went over this, the top of the standards here where the pegs are, and he rotated, did his little pike, and he landed right on it. Ooh. Fortunately, it went to the inside and fell into the pad and not onto the asphalt on the outside, but safety is a huge issue, and the hard surfaces around definitely can be a danger. On this picture too, I want you to look at these marks down here. These are marks for the vaulters to measure their takeoff. So this longer mark is usually 12 feet from the back of the box, and then these are all a foot apart. Do you do it differently, Paul, when you use it? I think that we always used feet. I don't think I ever set it up.
We use feet, yeah. They could be measured in centimeters. At some of the national indoors, we actually had to tape those down. It's nice when they're on the runway. For local high school competition, when I get out there early, I will take a piece of playground chalk and put those kind of marks down, and the coaches truly appreciate it.
Yeah, that determines, so the coaches want to stand off to the side over in here or on the other side so they can look right at and see where their athlete's foot takes off of those marks, because that gives a good indication of how high they're going to be able to jump, their swing, and so on. So it's nice to try to position yourself so you're not in their way. Okay, so there's a box collar. It's not required in all the USATF meets. It is required in some of them. Basically shows how it's placed in here. The box collar can impede the pole. So you have to be careful that the box collar or the padding is not over the box, because it can impede the pole and that can be dangerous. It can stop the pole. The young man that I said got hung up on the top of the standards, what he did was he planted, this is the back of the box where my cursor is, that's where the pole needs to plant. So depending on what your job is in an official, somebody needs to watch that plant, because sometimes they'll plant and then the pole will bounce up and hit one of these pads. And so that's a failed attempt. Also in his situation, when he planted, he got into this rut where every time he planted, it slid to the left corner of the box, flinging him off to the right. So it kind of gives you a little bit of you can't do much about it, but it gives you a little bit of a heads up about what's going on. And I've actually seen that at high school competitions, and I tell the kid and I tell the coach, because it's dangerous when that happens. So
these are the older style box collars, and the new one,
that's true,
actually folds into the box. And then it has a gap of perhaps 3 inches or so. I don't know the exact dimension. But what can happen is the kid can go up and give you a correct release. And then for some reason, while you're in the middle of watching that, all of a sudden you see the crossbar instantly change direction. And it's not the wind or anything, but during the release, he's pushed it against the box collar and now it's rebounding. So you have to be ready to make that call to realize that that wasn't a fault of his vaulting. That was something with the equipment down here. And it's akin to the wind. You know, if the wind is blowing, you got a good release, the guy goes over, and then the bar falls through afterwards, it still is a good vault. Because of the wind. And the same thing with this box collar. And this is why a lot of the vaulters don't really like it.
Right, and that Paul makes a good point. This right now is not a legal box collar. The new one, it does cut into the box a little bit more. You know, all of this stuff, removing debris and water from the box. Like I said before, verify adequate clearance for the poles. You got to make sure the pits are connected together and the top cover is in place, and so on. I don't know if all of you know, but there's different pin lengths for different levels. High school gets longer pins, and then the USATF and NCAA both use the 55-meter pins. So I don't know if Jim Glinsky's on here, but
no, Jim could not make it.
He's in Florida. He always had an extra set of pins in his box, so he would have both.
High school kids get upset with those 55s.
Yeah, so you want to look around, make sure you don't have any problems. You know, you're too close to the high jump, or in this situation right here, the pole vault pit is here, the 200-meter start is here. Your vaulters are going to not want to be starting their run when the starter has the pistol up in the air. So you need to be aware of all those kinds of things around you as well. This one is just a link for a liability. So at the beginning, you have to check the crossbar, check the sag, mark them. This shows one method of doing it. This is balanced on that little homemade PVC pipe thing. You can do it on chairs, on hurdles, but you want to make sure that the flat bottom of the bar is, they're both level on either side. You can see it's marked left and right, because you always want the same side of the bar on the left side and the same on the right. And the vaulters are going to hit it every now and then. It'll go flying in the air and flip around and be backwards. So that's one of the markings on the crossbar. On the underside, we usually mark X's and O's. And what that's going to do is going to help you when it's up on the peg and you have your bar lifters on the right and the left, you can say you need to have 2 O's on your side. You need to have 2 X's showing on your side, and that'll make sure the bar is even on both sides. This shows marking the standards. Now at a larger meet, you're not going to do this, but a lot of times we will have to mark the standards. So you can see that that's what this is indicating. He was marking 0 to 80. I guess USATF does have a difference, and they can set their standards anywhere between 0 and 80 in an open competition, which is in a youth or in a high school, it's 45 to 80.
Yeah, this is the UCS base. And the nice thing about this is you can set it up in such a way that you can roll the standards all the way back to 80 and they'll lock at 80. So because so many of the vaulters do want them all the way back, it's just a matter of pushing and you've got your 80. And then that becomes a handy reference because as the meet goes on and your pads start to move, it's an easy way to get your pads back in place and reestablish your reference points.
So that white line is a 0 line. And if you have somebody who's knows pole vaulting in their facility, they put the 0 line on the surface of the track before the pads come out at all. So that 0 line is even with the back of the box. And if they extend that line out a good distance on either side, it makes it very easy to make sure your standards are 0. This shows you.
Joanne, Paul, a question.
Yep,
going back to the bar. If those ends are not tight on the bar, have you taped them to the bar so they don't fall off or rotate?
For sure, in high school, because some of them are so bad.
You mean the collars at the crossbar?
The ends of the crossbar that rest on the pegs.
Yeah, there are a couple of different ways to do that, and when we show the high jump, I'll show you. You can put toothpicks in there to lock them in place, or you can put tape. And then what you want to do is put a couple reference marks in there so that you can correct them once they do move.
Okay.
So this is, it shows if there's no 0 line, you can put a bungee across usually the lowest peg I use, or you can just do it to the standard, or I put the crossbar up. And then if you move that to the back of the box, and we'll show using a plumb bob in a minute, but if you move that to the back of the box, that is your 0 line. That's how you establish the 0 line. So this is the plumb bob. Okay, so if you hang the plumb bob over the crossbar from back to front, then the plumb bob should touch the back of the box like it is in this picture. And that establishes a correct 0 line. The reason that's so important is because of safety. So you don't want the kid to come down in the box. And if they have the standards too far forward, there's a good likelihood that they could. So the 0 line is your critical piece. I think it's going to show the 0 again. I went up, but oh yeah, there is. So what this is showing here are that the pegs are 0.5 meters, half a meter here, okay? And that's gonna, when you're setting up your pit, that's gonna be important to know. So this is 0.5 and this one's 0.5. The difference between where the standard is and where the pegs are is about a meter. And here it says pegs must be 4.3 to 4.37 meters apart. And so that means the uprights, when you add in that meter, are going to be 5.3 to 5.37. And you can see them measuring that with a tape. And again, this is something, I don't know about you, Paul, but at the bigger meets, we check this stuff. You check it, don't you? Yeah, because there's
this is why you're there the day
no
before.
Guarantees. Yeah, there's no guarantees. They might have the best equipment in the world, but there's no guarantees they've set it up right.
No, and like I was telling you before, when I was at Drake the last time, where on the left side, there was a hard surface. And it looks like this is much the same thing at this particular track, but you'll notice that the right standard is sitting on grass, unless there's a pad behind it over there. So the facility has to have its own creative way of keeping that right standard in sync with the left standard, as opposed to Amherst High School, where they were 6 inches off. So we don't know what they're like at the new one. But yeah, we take the time to make sure that everything is precisely measured with this. And it takes a good four or 5 hours, because you're setting up one pit and then you set up your second one for the combined events. And then you have to have other zeroed out, because tomorrow the wind's going to change. So you have to be ready for everything.
So zeroing the standards, there's a couple, you want the standards parallel to each other, parallel to the runway. And so there's 2 ways to do it. And this shows both ways. It's not really worth going in through it in great detail. We need to really like take you to a place and do it. But this is the 2-point method. So if I have it set at 0 and I have it set at 80, and this measurement up here on the dotted line, if they're equal, then you're pretty good, right? Here you can see what happens a lot. The standards get rotated, so your measurement at the dotted line is going to be longer than your measurement on the green line. And you can see this green line measurement is your 0 line. The parallelogram is the most accurate, so I'll just go over it quickly. But what you do out on the middle of your runway is you put 2 tacks. You put a tack here, and they're 80 centimeters apart, okay? Your standards are going from 0 to 80. So what you want to do is, if you measure from this CA and this DB, they should be the same, okay? But then also,
you do it on the other side.
You have to do it on the other side, okay? So this shows your 2 tacks in the center of the runway. This shows it doing it on both sides. So this and this have to be equal, and this DB and this BF also have to be equal. But what you do, you've created a parallelogram on each side, and they're, what are those, congruent? I don't know what it's called, but they should be, the distances should be the same, okay? So that's a crash course in how you figure that out.
You know, and it's important. And then once you do that, you roll your standards back and forth to make sure that that crossbar isn't drifting. Once you set that up, either method, you double check it.
Okay, so this just says it guarantees that they're parallel to the runway, because you formed that parallelogram. And that's what I've already said. In addition, you know, you have to check and make sure your standards are level. This is on the right-hand side is a shim that, you know, we use shims sometimes, like they use every place else, to make things even and level and square and all that good stuff. This is using the plumb bob to find your 0. So the plumb bob is coming over the top of the bar, and hopefully your standards say 0. So, and anyway, that is the 0 line. Okay, wherever that plumb bob comes down, these are set at 0. So I don't know how much we need to get into all this stuff. So I usually put a level on the bar just to make sure the right and the left sides, I always do, but to make sure the right and left sides are the same. And that's basically what it's saying. Because oftentimes, I think at Brockboard, the one standard is 10 higher on one side than the other to get the same height and get everything level. So there is usually a difference. This is showing a laser to measure. The laser is set at the back of the box at the 0, okay? And then you pull your standards to 0 to make every measurement. And then you shoot the laser up. So the laser either has to have an offset, or I made my own wooden stand, so my offset is actually in the stand. And I before I go to a meet, I check my laser and make sure it's, I check it with a metal tape to make sure the measurement is accurate.
Yeah, and even at the big meets, they take the laser out and will double check that it's shooting correctly. You've got to make sure.
Tape the standard, tape around, or tacks. You can put tacks in the corner or tape to make sure, because vaulters are going to hit them, a lot of them, unless they're those big gill standards like you saw, they're going to move them. Put the covers in place, and that's it. So that's it on the pole vault setup. And before we go to the high jump, I don't know if you have any questions. The only thing that I would like to add, if the vaulter breaks a pole, that is not an attempt. They get to repeat that. What else was I gonna say? I guess my philosophy is that I like to run an efficient competition where it moves along quickly, because I think the vaulters perform better that way. And so I try not to belabor anything. I asked my son, who was a pole vaulter, I said, what was your biggest gripe with the officials when you were vaulting? And he says, the ones that didn't pay attention to the wind. So a quick story with that. He was in his senior year vaulting at Hillsdale, a big tailwind. Wind is a dangerous thing for pole vaulters. There was a big tailwind. So he was vaulting with this other kid, Bryant Wilson. They were the only two left. Bars at 17.7, Bryant makes it. Danny goes, he runs through, he makes it. Lands in the pit, doesn't get up. And I'm like starting to panic after a few minutes, thinking, oh my God, what happened to him? He must have gotten hurt. What happened was the bar was at 17.7, his pole was 16.6. The pole blew under the crossbar, caught his shorts, ripped them off on the way down, and he landed in the pit with, well, he had his spandex on, but no shorts. So actually when he got up, he was laughing. But just to give you an idea as an official how dangerous the wind can be, I've worked at competitions where if you have a real gusty wind and they're running it anyways, that you do need to get with your referee and your games committee and make some accommodations for wind, because that can be a dangerous situation.
What kind of accommodations would you make?
Well, Tim and I actually did that at RIT once. We spoke with all the vaulters ahead of time, first I cleared it with the field referee and the person that was the meet director, but it was a real gusty wind, and we decided that if they got up on, we called them up on the runway, and then all of a sudden the wind started to gust, we would stop the clock. Okay. And I just feel that their safety is more important, right? And so we would stop the clock, and if in the middle of the minute it got gusty and they raised a hand and I acknowledged it, and I would stop my clock. I didn't reset it, but I would give them, time for the wind to calm down before they had to start their run. And we tried, as an official too, we tried to call them up when it was calmer because that wind situation can get very dangerous. The whole thing with a pole vaulter, especially if there's a headwind, is that they've got to get into the pit to be safe. And if there's a strong headwind and they get hung up, that's a pretty dangerous situation.
A few years ago at the MAC championships at UB, didn't they have the pit all set to go and it was into a headwind? Yeah. And then they had to move it clear to the other because it was a
they set it up backwards. They set it up backwards. I was wondering if the nor'easter was coming in that day. But,
yeah. Because the wind whipped around.
And they got it adjusted in time.
Yeah, but you guys did all your measurements and everything ready to go, and they decided to move to the other end of the runway.
Well, not the first time. The last championship I was at, that was the same year we were in Brockport. We had the pit set up, ready to go, and we knew the wind was going to change. And one of the referees comes in and says, "Why are you guys setting up the pit going to the north?" And she says, we're going to use that one over there. And we just said, nodded our heads, said, yeah, well, this is a just in case. And at 11:30, the just in case came through. They decided they were going to use that pit. So fortunately, we had it ready. Well, one of the locals told us the wind was going to shift in the afternoon, and that's the prevailing wind there in Des Moines. So it all worked out.
Okay, are we ready to, Paul, this is your.
And I'll just go through this as quickly as we can because it's getting late. Yeah. Okay, so of course your preparations, you want to make it safe, you want to make it legal and fair, and that's why we set everything up as precisely as we do. The pits are big, we don't have to worry about that when you go for a big competition. Locally, you want to make sure that those pads have no holes in them when you're setting them up for, let's say, a local high school or a regional competition. At this level, things are in good shape. So here you are at Eugene, and they have the nice big gill, and you can see that that's been set up and ready to go. These standards still have the high-low bar on them. Some of the modern standards now just have one platform to set your high jump bar on, and those are kind of nice to work with. Once your pit is set up, you can see as you look to the left side over here, right near that microphone, you have the white line, that's your foul line, that has to be laid down first, and then the whole pit is built up around that. And you make your measurements from the center, and you can see the guys adjusting here. But what you also want to measure is the very end where the collars are around this edge of your crossbar to be sure that those heights are the same, to ensure through the competition that you have a level bar. And you want to check those periodically as your bar progresses. Okay, the indicator line, like I said, we lay that down ahead of time. It's going to be about 12 meters long because your crossbar is 4 meters. Each standard is about 1 meter, and it has to extend 3 meters beyond that. But that's your foul line for the competition. And here they must be tagging. Oh, that's fine. They were just stomping down the line.
Sorry about that.
That's fine. You know, okay, standard high jump standard base here. Once you got it in place, you've got to mark the position of this because somebody's going to collide with it. And, you know, you have to be able to put it back in the same position. You can see with these, this one, you've got the levelers with it. So this is a nice one to have. But before you put those in place, you want to make sure that you've cranked them all the way down and then make your leveling adjustments after that. And similarly, like you said with the pole vault, you will check the vertical in east-west and then north-south directions on those standards. Make sure everything's perfectly square.
10 centimeters?
Yeah, and 10 centimeter difference between the pads and the standard. That's the annoying part because the high jumpers really cause that thing to bounce. And at each height change, many times you're out there adjusting your pads. Okay, so your crossbar is 4 meters, 4 to 404. You've got 1 centimeter between the standard and the edges, and you make sure that they're parallel to each other. You look at them from the side, and you know you're good to go. You want to make it perpendicular to the ground, just like with your pole vault. And again, those are your levelers, so you get those down first, and then set up your standard accordingly. And again, check it with your level. Okay, crossbar, 3 centimeters is your diameter. End pieces have to have a circle on it, no more square end pieces. And the bias of 2 centimeters, maximum 2 centimeters. You check all your crossbars before the competition, find the best ones, the one with the least bias in them. That'll be your number 1 bar. Stretch it across your hurdle. And once you've done this, the bar self rolls into position. Then what you do is you adjust your collars so that they're flat, set it up on the hurdles, and then you mark your ends. And I think they'll show you that. This is the sag down position, which is the most stable. Sag up, if you've got a really old crossbar at a high school meet, you want the sag to go up because that'll give you a much more level bar. They're not too concerned with the bias, but I'm sure we've all seen them sag a few inches. And so if you do the sag up orientation, you kind of eliminate that, even though the bar is less stable in that. Okay, sag down, it's more stable. Again, that's where you're going to do it for the pole vault also.
Is it same 2 centimeter sag for pole vault?
It could be a tad different. I'm not sure. You know, at a meet, we've got brand new bars that you work with, so you don't worry too much. And again, we put them out there on that hurdle, and you find the one with the least sag. That's number 1, and you go from there accordingly. The next is number 2 crossbar, and you just kind of work your way down through them. If there's something that looks radically off, that's what you would be concerned about. Now, the middle of the crossbar has to be marked because that's where you're going to drop your plumb line to your foul line, and it acts the same way as the 0 line in the pole vault. A kid steps onto that, and in the process of coming in for a run through, let's say, that's a foul. If he steps in but jumps over the bar, that's okay. There you're marking your endpoints of the crossbar, and it's better to put 2 marks on it. This way you're going to see that cross piece, that your collar has rotated. Okay, and Fred asked about this earlier. This is one way of securing your ends. If you put a piece of tape in there, regular old adhesive tape, and then slide your collar over that, that does a really good job of keeping those collars in place, so that at many high school facilities, you see them all taped together. Usually when I'm there early, I like to take those apart and do this method. It's more snug. You can also put toothpicks in there. I remember those days, but they don't work as well. You know, that's the more archaic mean. Again, measuring your height, you want to make sure that your tape doesn't bend. And that's what I like about the measuring stick. And I'm just going to step over here.
Careful with your chandelier.
Yep. Okay. If you look at me in this picture, okay, having this measuring stick is the greatest thing going, because you can measure the middle of your crossbar, and you've got your plumb line that you've dropped right to the base here, so that you measure from the same spot each time. And then you can go and take this and not only measure the middle, but then go to one side and the other, so that you measure where the collar positions also are. So once you've leveled your bar, you know where this should be touching on there, and that speeds up your process, and it also ensures that your bar is going to be level. When you're working with standards, if you guys have been to the pole vault at Hobart, you probably noticed that on the windows, they have these different indicator lines. And you got to make sure you know which line you're working from. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not, but this, you know, you're reading from the same point every time. And many times we'll put pencil marks, tape marks on there and make sure we know where we're reading from. Standards, again, they're going to be in the same position. You can mark them with the thumbtacks, which is a good way, or with tape marks. Either way, somebody's going to collide with it at some time. Okay, and there you got your mark on that Mondo surface so that you know where you're going to measure from. You want to make sure that that pole vault, high jump runway is clean, and they get dusty, and some of that surface grit will come up. So you want to sweep those down and make sure that there is a smooth takeoff for those jumpers. Now with the pole vault, they're planting in the box. They've got a pretty good way to deliver, but high jumpers are going off that foot, and I've seen them slip on bad surfaces. So you've got to be careful about that. Sweep them periodically. Make sure it's clean. In your venue area, you need to have a wind indicator so that they can judge the wind, of course, for pole vault and high jump. Markers, 2 markers. Usually they can set up 3 for warm-ups in the high jump. So normally what you do is have them go to 1 mark, and then identify any mark that's not labeled and ask who it belongs to. And they have their second mark that they go to. We pull off all of the other marks and we're good to go with the competition.
And what is, how far is,
sorry?
You know, Paul, when we were doing the throws, we had said that when the competition starts, the ring is the domain of the athlete. Does that hold true with the runway and the box and all the other stuff?
Yes.
The high end pole?
Yes. You stay away as much as possible. You know, if you're the side officials for the high jump, you want to be 3 to 5 feet away from those standards so that that kid has a nice clear approach, you know, if he's coming from the left or from the right. With the pole vault, your lifters, your standard person are seated off to the side. The pit boss is off on the side, and the flagger is off on the side. And the flagger won't get up until the athlete has run by. So you have to have a nice open area for that kid to perform his event.
What about cleaning out the box, drying out the box, stuff like that?
Yeah, when it's necessary, you just do it.
Okay.
Even by hand, if possible. And you know, high school, many times you'll find the end of the previous jumper's pole in there because they have that pole cap on the bottom. So you got to be careful about things like that being in there too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah. The markers are normally the foam markers that we give to kids, and you give them a couple tacks and have them tack it down so that if somebody else runs over it, they don't pull it up. Shoes, of course, or any big objects, they're not acceptable markers. Okay, NCAA, no marks within 2 meters of the standards. That's standard. We have identified the marks and we've got that. So we talked about that. And yeah, we're good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anybody have any questions for Luann or Paul?
Hey, Kathy, can you hear me? This is Dave Helm.
Yes. Yep.
I noticed sometimes when you measure the height of the crossbar, sometimes the tape is behind the crossbar instead of the front, where I saw the picture looked like he was measuring it from the front to the top of the crossbar. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you should be measuring to the front.
Backside of the crossbar.
Yes, because that's what's, you're measuring to that white line that you've laid down. That front edge of the white line is your 0 line. So the front edge of the crossbar has to coincide with that.
Okay, thank you.
And that's why when you plumb it to the front.
Okay, oh, I got you now. Yeah, this is a crazy question, but 1 centimeter between standards and end of the bar. Your 1 centimeter space.
Yes.
Between standards and the end of the bar. How much maximum wider could you go away from?
Well, you know, when you read the rule, it says there must be at least 1 centimeter.
I've read that.
Yeah. See, so you know, and I when I look at that, I said, well, you have a finger space, but if you're, you know, if your standard really starts to drift, and let's say you're in a high school competition, well, then what I would do is just kind of nudge it along and pull it in a little bit so that it's close to that centimeter, but it may not be precise. At a big meet, you wouldn't have that problem because with all of you working together to set the thing up, it's going to be perfectly perpendicular.
Yeah. I've seen in high school meets, sometimes it's actually touching against the standard.
That's what you don't want.
Which is not good. Then it won't drop for sure.
No. Yeah, and you watch kids touch that, and yeah, the bar didn't go down. Well, guess why?
Tight. Thank you. Thank you.
I've got kind of a question for Kathy. Is it possible to upload the PowerPoint presentation here and Chris's PowerPoint from before to our website for future reference?
Yes, we are recording all these.
Okay, thank you.
And when it's all done, we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
So I have one other thing. I developed like a resource page that I'm going to email everybody when I'm done. And a lot of the resources are just a link so you can just click on it and look at it. There's some attachments on it as well. So, and if you need any other materials that you've seen and you don't get, just ask, because my name and phone number and everything will be on there if you need to get a hold of me or Paul. Okay.
Yeah, and you know, with Perry's really qualified to do these vertical jumps now too. He was technical manager in Albuquerque, and the day before we were ready to go, we had a hole in the box. I had never, ever come across that in all the years that I've been there, but somehow he got it welded together and we were good for our competition, Perry. So you're the man.
Thanks, Paul.
Listen, out of all the things tonight, I like the banker's clip to mark the athlete that's up and running. But you know what? I looked it up because, Paul, you said you can't get them in Office Max anymore. So I looked it up. A banker's clip is $9. If you can get a Hemmer's clip, you get 20 for $9. So buy a Hemmer's clip.
Okay.
There you go.
And I'm going to go out and buy one because you don't know how many times I've lost my position on a sheet.
Well, you know, the banker's clip, they used to be they were dirt cheap.
$9 at Amazon.
Yeah. Now they don't make them.
Any other questions? Okay, then I'd like to thank Luann and Paul for an excellent presentation. And if you do have any more questions, get in touch with Luann and Paul.
Yeah, Chris, I'd like to thank you for helping us get the, you know, the presentation together too. I know you worked with Luann a lot on getting everything together to get the PowerPoint. It's beyond me. So thanks again for all your help.
No problem. Luann did all the work, not me.
Okay, then our next meeting will be February 23rd, and it will be Race Walk, Sharon Gudadaro, and combined events, Matt Merrill will be presenting. So we will see you all on February 23rd.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, Utter.
Okay, bye.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good
night.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks. Thanks, Luann.
Good night.